Well now, are you settled? Welcome back to Celticism. The nights are colder now, the wind a little sharper, the fields gone dark at the edges. We're drawing close to Halloween, the old night when the veil is thin and the dead are set to walk. But here by the fire you're safe. Let your eyes soften, not closed, just soft. Let the shadows blur and drift at the edges of your sight. And if your eyes fall shut, open them again, gently. The more you try to stay awake, the quicker sleep will take you. Let your brows smooth, let your jaw loosen. Let your shoulders sink and your breath slow. And if you'd like to help this little fireside grow, leave a like, subscribe, and tell me tomorrow how you slept and what tales you'd like next. For now, settle close, and first, a Halloween tale. A tale called Tea for Two. Rain ran like black threads through the lane. Jack-o'-lanterns, old turnips with crooked smiles glowed in a few windows. Somewhere up the hill, a bonfire popped and hissed, and the smoke came down through the hedges. Ailid Byrne walked with her hood low and her shoulders tight against the rain. She had walked a long time that day, too long. Her feet were raw and the road had stopped being a road and turned into a string of puddles. Then she saw the cottage, a low roof, 2 square windows lit warm, a little gate with peeling paint. She almost kept going and then turned in and knocked. The door opened just a hand's width. An old woman's face looked out, tidy white bun, neat cardigan, spectacles shining with the lamplight, and a smile that didn't move. "Oh, love," the woman said, her voice sing-song and soft. "On Halloween night of all nights, come in, we'll have tea for two." Ailid stepped into the small sitting room. Roses climbed on the wallpaper. Porcelain dogs stood along the shelf. The fire burned low but steady. It smelled of coal and lavender polish. "Sit by the range," the woman said. "I'm Vi. We'll warm you up. There's no sense letting a child turn to ice." "I'm not a child," Ailid said, but she sat and held her hands to the heat. "Of course you're not," Vi said, smiling wider. "You've those strong eyes. Thin, though. Are you eating at all?" "I manage," Ailid said. "Traveller, are you?" Vi asked, busy with the cups. "Or lost? It's a night for being lost. The dead are out, you know. They like doorways." "I travel," Ailid said. "Work where I can." "Work," Vi said, as if the word were sugar on her tongue. "Isn't that lovely?" She set the tray down, 2 cups of tea, a bowl of sugar, and a plate piled with meat, thick, torn strips, pink, slick, still steaming. Ailid blinked. "You'll have some," Vi said, lifting a strip between 2 thin fingers. "It's good for you, keeps me strong." She sucked the meat into her mouth with a wet sound and chewed with her lips half open, juice running down her chin and pooling at the edge of the plate. Ailid looked down at her tea. "Where are your people?" Vi asked. "Have you any?" "I'm fine," Ailid said. "I do better on my own." "Do you?" Vi said. You have the look of one no one keeps, not a husband, not a mother, not even a decent friend. Ah, but don't pout, pet, I'm only teasing. She smiled again. The crumbs of the skin clung to the corner of her mouth where the meat had stuck. Where are yours? Aelid asked, because the room wanted a noise and she did not want it to be her breath. Gone, Vi said brightly. Halloween takes who it likes. The ones it leaves sit quiet and eat. She took another strip and slurped it down. Go on, she said. Drink. It's strong. I made it with the good water. Aelid tasted the tea. It was hot and metal sharp. She set it down. Not to your taste? Vi asked, head tilted. So fussy. Who taught you to be fussy? No one taught you at all, I'd say. No one told you were pretty either, but you are, in a ragged little way, pretty enough for trouble. Aelid's cheeks warmed. I should be going. On Halloween night? Vi said. In this rain? No, stay. Tell me where you slept last night. In a barn? In a ditch? Did you cry? Do you cry loud, pet? Does your voice break? I like when voices break. Aelid's hand curled tight on the chair arm. Please stop. Sorry, love, Vi said sweetly. I forget myself. It's only talk. I do like to talk. Eat, then. She took the plate, chose a strip, and held it towards Aelid. Aelid did not reach. You're a stubborn little bitch, aren't you? Vi said, sing-song soft as a lullaby. The word fell like a small stone in a quiet pond. Aelid stood. I'm leaving. After we talk a little, Vi said, still sweet, still smiling. Her hand came down and rested on Aelid's wrist, cool, papery, strong. Tell me your mother's name. Tell me your father's. Tell me why no one taught you to sit straight and keep your knees together. Let go, Aelid said. Do men follow you? They do, I'd say. There's a smell off you, road and rain and wanting. Let go, Aelid said again, and pulled free. The fire coughed, the lamp on the dresser flickered. For one heartbeat, Vi's eyes flared red in the glass of her spectacles. Aelid's breath hitched. The flare died. Only dull grey eyes behind the neat glass remained. You look pale, Vi said. Sit. We'll go easy again. Where were you born? South, I'd say. Cork, Kerry, or nowhere at all. Aelid sat because her knees felt wrong. Cork, she said. There now, Vi said. Cork, salt in the air. Did your dad drink? Did your mam shout when he didn't come home? Do you remember the sound of it? I do. You said your people are gone, Aelid said. Vi's smile shrank and sharpened. I said Halloween takes who it likes. Don't twist my words, pet, and sit straight. She lifted another strip of meat and pushed the plate nearer. Eat. No. Ungrateful, Vi sang. You come in, you drip on my rug, you sneer at my food, ungrateful little. She stopped, the smile switching back on like a lamp. Tell me about your man. I have no man, Aelid said. Not now. Not now, Vi echoed. Because he left, or because you broke him? Your kind breaks things. Don't cry, it makes you plain. I'm not crying, Aelid said, and felt the heat at her eyes. There, Vi whispered, delighted. Your voice is starting to shake. I knew it would. The lamp flickered again, the room dimmed, rain stroked the window. Somewhere outside, children knocked doors in masks and laughed, and the sound ran thin along the lane. Do you let the masks in? Vi asked, listening. The dead like masks, they slip right through. I'm going, Aelid said, standing a second time. You'll sit? Vi said, still sweet, still smiling. You'll sit because I asked you nice, and I cut the meat fine, and I smiled and smiled for you, you rude little bitch. The last word came sharper, the smile stayed, the lamp died, the fire fell to red, the room dropped into black. 2 red points opened in the dark where Vi had sat. They were level with Aelid's eyes, and much too still. They blinked once, then went out. And then came a sound like old wood bent wrong, like ribs twisting in a narrow space, crack, creak, a small giggle, high and thin. Something scuttled across the rug and brushed Aelid's boot, a wet, quick, many-jointed thing. She flinched and caught her breath in both hands and held it tight. Silence. The candles licked back to life on their own. The chair across from her was empty. The plate of meat lay tipped on the rug, grease seeping into the wool, a strip folded like a tongue. Vi, Aelid whispered. The room held itself still. A soft tap began above her. Tap, tap, tap. Slowly, Aelid looked up. A puddle swelled on the ceiling, round and trembling. A drop lifted softly from the air and slid up to kiss it. Another followed, and another. The puddle grew from drips that rose, not fell. Aelid's gaze fell inch by inch. The floorboards were there, and also thin like paper laid over glass. Through them, pressed close, was Vi's face. Her mouth was wide enough to hurt, the teeth too long and too many. Her eyes glowed red, her hands long-fingered and strong spread against the underside of the board like a woman looking in through a window. Drool steamed up from her lip and fed the ceiling puddle. Stay, she said, the voice soft and hollow like a word dropped down a well. Aelid turned to run. The floor went soft, it bowed like water. Vi's hands flexed, the thin layer gave. Aelid dropped as if through skin. The chair by the fire rocked once and stilled. The candles burned steady. The porcelain dogs smiled their little smile. Outside, the rain slackened and the lanterns in the windows winked. Inside, there was tea for 2, and only 1 cup was touched. The lane is quiet again. The fire is low and the room is warm. Let your shoulders fall. Let your breath slow. Stay soft and safe as we drift into the next tale. And so let's move on to the next tale. A tale called She's My Child. It was Halloween night in Galway. Smoke from the bonfires drifted through the lanes. The children in masks carried turnip lanterns, laughing and chasing one another across the stones. Women left bowls of water at their doors, a pinch of salt on the sill, old habits against spirits that might wander on this night when the veil was thin. Garroge MacDonagh stood in the doorway of his small cottage and watched his daughter Jill twirl in the yard. 7 years old, thin as a reed, clutching her rag doll. "If I ever have to be without you, Da," she said suddenly with that strange seriousness children sometimes carry, "I'd just fly away." He laughed, though the words cut him deep. "You'll not be without me," he said, and he meant it. But her mother was gone a year now, and Pather Loughlin, Jill's grandfather, her mother's father, had never trusted Garroge. That afternoon, Pather came in his good boots and heavy coat, and with the voice of a man used to being obeyed, he said, "You're a dreamer with holes in your pockets. That makes you dangerous to a child. She'll come with me to Inisheer, and I'll raise her proper." "You'll not stop me." Pather tapped the butt of a gun under his coat. "See me at the pier before dusk. Stand in my way, and I'll stand you aside." Then he left. The cottage felt smaller after. Jill played, unaware, but Garroge's heart was heavy. He had no money, no work that week, only love and worry. He thought of the old hermit's cottage out beyond the bog. They said the man had left relics, coins, bones that carried luck. Garroge told himself he would take just one thing, and sell it, and buy food, and show Pather he could provide. He kissed Jill's hair and left her with Mrs. McCarthy. The hermit's house leaned under blackthorn trees. The door gave easy. Inside smelled of nettle and iron. Jars lined the shelves, each tied with scraps of paper. On a table sat a small cage covered with a cloth. Something inside rasped like a sick animal. Garroge reached for a cracked saucer that held a few coins. His hand slipped on oil cut deep on the glass and blood dripped. The cage rattled. He pulled back the cloth. A twisted thing lay within, half bird, half foal, its eyes wrong, its breath broken. It was dying. One eye rolled white, the other burned green, then black, then a sharp red. It looked at him, and a thin bolt of light stabbed from its eye into his own. Pain flared. It shot through Garroge's skull into his chest, where it sat like a stone on fire. He staggered. The creature gave a final shudder and went still. Garroge stumbled into the yard, clutching his chest. Down the track, Pather's cart rattled by. Jill sat between two men, crying with her mouth closed like brave children do. "Da!" she shouted when she saw him. He tried to run, but each step was pain. The hot stone in his chest dragged him down. He staggered, then fell to his knees in the mud. The cart clattered away toward the pier. For a moment, he thought, "They're gone. I can't." But something inside pushed back. No. He forced himself up. He staggered, then walked. His breath tore from his throat. His bones ached as if cracking from within. He pushed harder. His walk became a run. Then his body broke. His arms lengthened. His back stretched. His feet hammered the stones. He burst into flame, not fire, but green light that moved like it loved him. He was a horse, a spectral horse of green smoke and wind. His mane streamed like fire, his hooves sparked from stone. He thundered down the road faster than he ever thought possible. The pier came into sight. A Galway hooker, broad and black-hulled, its tan sail rising, was already sliding from the pier, ropes cast off. Peadar stood on deck with Jill held close, barking orders to the crew. Garroge's hooves struck the stones of the pier. The boat was already moving, slow but steady, into the chop of the bay. The horse did not slow, he leapt. Mid-air his body cracked again, folding, twisting. Hooves became talons, mane to wings, muscle to a sharp black beak. He became a peregrine falcon, burning green, wings spread wide. He cut through the wind, diving low over the water, then rising, then dropping hard onto the deck of the hooker. He folded back into a man, soaked and heaving. The green light still flickered under his skin. "Da!" Jill cried, breaking from Peadar and running into his arms. He caught her and held her and kissed her hair. Peadar raised the gun. "She's mine now. She'll eat, she'll work, she'll do as she's told. No wildness, no nonsense, I'll break it out of her." Garroge, still on his knees, said steady, "She's my child. She needs love. She needs laughter. She needs to be small while she is small." "Love and laughter don't fill bowls," Peadar snapped. "You give her nothing but holes in her shoes. I'll give her order." The boat pitched, the mast groaned, sailcloth snapped. The crew looked away, silent. "Please," Garroge whispered, "she's mine." "Enough!" Peadar raised the gun and fired. The crack was flat and final. Garroge fell back. Jill clung to him, sobbing. He put his forehead to hers and said, calm and quiet, "I'll always love you. When the wind runs the road, hear me in it. When the sky pulls at you, let it." A thin green flash leapt from his eyes into hers. She gasped. Her eyes glowed with the same spectral light. Peadar barked, "Come here, girl. You'll do as I say. You'll live in my house and keep quiet in it." Jill stood. The boat lifted and fell. Rain ran in her hair. She looked down at her da, pale and still, and she looked at Peadar, face twisted with command. Her voice was steady. "I'll fly away." She broke into green light. Wings spread from her shoulders. She lifted into the air, rising past the mast, higher than the gulls, a spectral bird against the clouds. Peadar shouted her name, but his voice cracked and vanished in the wind. Jill never looked back. She was gone, into the sky. The crew crossed themselves. The gun sagged in Peadar's hand. Garroge lay still, his face eased at last, like a man finished with a hard task. Far above, through the clouds, a green bird crossed the moon. And on Halloween night, when the veil was thin as a breath, a child who once said she would fly away kept her word. The sea is quiet now. The sails are lowered. The storm has passed. Let those shoulders loosen more. Let your breath fall even softer. Keep the eyes blurred and let the night carry you deeper. Another story awaits just ahead, but for now you're safe and the fire is steady. And now for the next tale this Halloween night. A tale called The Windmill Keeper. People in the village used to laugh at the old story. They said it was only a fireside tale told to scare children and keep them from the fields on dark nights. But the old ones remembered. They remembered the landlord's son years and years ago on a Halloween night like the one to come. Drunk and bold, he caught a leprechaun in a glass jar. Not the jolly kind from pictures, a sharp-toothed, long-armed thing in a tatty green hood with eyes like wet stones. He tapped the glass with a stick. He jabbed and poked and laughed when the little creature screamed. The leprechaun cracked the lid and wriggled out, torn and shaken, and spat a curse through broken teeth. On Halloween night, the harvest will eat the hand that feeds it. Your bones will grind, your seed will turn to rot. Over time, the tale turned to smoke, then to nothing. Only the old men said it now and then, and even they said it soft. The week before Halloween, Paddy Kelleher swore he saw a man out by the windmill at midnight, tall, far too tall, gaunt as a fence post, pale as chalk. He walked slow along the edges of the pumpkin patch and shook white powder from a sack. He didn't scatter it like seed. He stroked it into the soil with the side of his hand, gentle as a mother laying down a baby. Paddy blinked, and the man was gone. He told no one. He only locked his door and left a pinch of salt on the sill, the way his grandmother used to do. On Halloween night, 3 children went out with turnip lanterns and paper masks. Kieran Daly, Nell Ward and Paddy Roach. They were 9, 10 and 11. They had bags for sweets and courage for dares. They went up past the lane, past the bonfires where the boys threw sticks and the men told lies. They went past the church where the iron bell hung dark. The air was damp and cold and smelled of peat smoke. Bet you wouldn't run up to the old windmill, Kieran said, trying to sound like a leader. Bet you wouldn't go inside, Paddy said, always pushing one step farther. Nell, who was the smallest, kept quiet and watched the sky. The moon was almost full. A ring of pale, thin cloud hung around it, strange and misty. The windmill stood on the rise above the fields. Its arms turned slow, creak, creak, creak in the light wind. No one milled grain there anymore. The door was usually locked. Tonight, it stood a little open. The pumpkins lay fat and heavy in the patch below, their vines thick as rope. Kieran lifted his lantern. "Go on," he said to Paddy, because he was the one who dared in the first place, and Paddy snorted. "I'm not scared." He pushed the door. The three of them stepped inside. The first thing they noticed was the dust. It hung in the air like smoke. Every breath tasted of coin and chalk. A big stone wheel turned slow under a wooden hopper. A bone-white powder poured from the stones into sacks waiting at the bottom. At first, Kieran thought it was flour. Then he saw the shapes caught in the gap where the stones kissed. Round bits, long bits, a curve like a bowl that wasn't a bowl at all. A skull, ribs, small bones like birds or children's hands. Nell put a sleeve to her mouth. "What is it?" she whispered, though she knew. "Animal," Paddy said, but his voice shook. Behind the millstones, deeper in the shadows, sacks lay open, not grain sacks, sacks full of bones, dug from the earth. A long yellow arm lay across the lip of one, wedding ring still on the finger. Kieran's lantern shook in his hand. He wanted to run, he wanted to shout. He wanted to be home with his mam and the fire and the smell of stew. Nothing in his life had ever looked like this room. Nell pointed with her chin. "Where's the miller?" Kieran swallowed. "There isn't one." Paddy forced a laugh. "It's a prank. Someone's put bones here to frighten us." The mill wheel groaned. The white dust shivered in the lamplight. From the far wall came the soft sound of cloth moving against wood. They turned their lanterns. The wall was old stone, damp and cold. Then it was not a wall, it was skin. A figure melted through, slow as smoke, through the crack and stood taller than any man should stand. He was pale and thin and clean, like someone who had washed away all the things that make a person and kept only the lines. His eyes were flat and grey. His lips were stretched into a tired smile. He carried a sack in one hand. Dust ran down his sleeve. Nell made a sound that wasn't a word. Paddy dropped his lantern and it went out. The keeper, for that was the name their minds gave him without telling them, lifted his free hand and put a finger to his white lips. Shh. The millstones turned, creaked, crumble, thrum, bone powder hissed into the sacks. The keeper tipped his head as if listening to a faraway sound. Then he walked straight through the millstone axle as if the wood were water and into the deeper dark. The three children ran. They ran down the slope through the pumpkin patch. Their lanterns swung and threw mad shadows. Vines snagged their boots. The pumpkins looked up at them with cut faces and candles in their bellies, grinning like idiots. At the bottom of the rise, Kieran stopped and put both hands on his knees. "I'm going to be sick." "Don't," said Nell, practical even when afraid. "Just move." Paddy looked back. Up the slope, the keeper walked between the rows, shaking powder from his sack. He moved, smooth, like he was part of the wind. Bone meal fell on the soil, pale in the moonlight. "Go," Paddy said, and they went. By the time they reached the village, the moon was clear of the cloud, almost full. Light lay on the roofs, the lanes shone. They kept to the middle of the road, away from hedges and garden walls. They passed the church. The iron bell hung black, a round mouth that had nothing to say. Home, Kieran said. We go home, we tell them. They split at the square. Paddy ran left, Kieran right, and Nell straight on. She went through the gate, into her yard, and found her mother asleep in the chair by the range, her knitting on her lap. Nell, her mam said, half waking with a smile. Are you all right, love? A root moved on the floor behind the chair. Nell thought it was a rope, and then it tightened. It slipped up her mother's leg and around her waist and over her shoulders, quick and sure, like hands that knew the shape they wanted. Ma'am, Nell shouted. She grabbed the thing and it felt like plant and meat together. It writhed in her grip, slick and strong. Another root slid from under the table and reached for her mam's throat. Nell yanked it back. The stove light showed it clear. Pumpkin vine, green and thick and full of watery veins. It pulsed and trembled. More vines crawled under the floor, through the cracks in the frame, up through the broken tile by the sink. They weren't slow, they were fast, and they knew the way to a body. Her mam tried to stand. 2 roots pinned her wrist to the arms of the chair. A third went around her chest and tightened. A 4th found her throat. Her eyes went wide. She made a sound that was not a word. Ma'am. Nell took the iron poker from beside the range and stabbed down. The vine smoked and recoiled at the touch of iron. Her mam dragged in a breath. Get out, she choked. Nell stopped for half a heartbeat to kiss the back of her mam's hand, and then she ran into the lane. Across the road, a man stumbled from his house with white boils swelling on his neck and cheeks. They were round, they had faint seams, they looked like pumpkins the size of eggs. One popped with a wet sound and yellow pulp ran down his collar. He stared at Nell with eyes that didn't see her and fell to his knees. From his doorway, vines poured like water. They found his ankles and pulled. He went backwards, heels digging grooves, fingers clawing at the stones, nails cracking. Other doors banged open, up and down the lane, shouts, crashes. A woman screamed until her voice broke. A dog howled and then choked and then stopped. Kieran came running from his lane, face white. Nell, where's your mam? Nell said. He shook his head once, hard. Where's Paddy? She said. Kieran looked past her. Paddy came staggering into the square with vines around his legs up to his knees. Nell, he gasped. Help! Both of them went to him. The vines burned from the poker when Nell laid it on them. The name for the memory came to her like a gift. Iron. Iron hurts them. Her grandmother said it. She had not listened then, but she'll listen now. They tore the vines from Paddy. He sobbed and let them. Across the square, more roots came. They climbed the pump, wrapped the trough, split the slats on the benches. They slid up the walls and under the roof slates and through the gaps of the windows. In every house, people shouted and then went quiet. Nell felt something give in her chest, not a bone, something else. Church, she said. What? Kieran said. The bell, she said. Come on. They ran. The church door was heavy oak with big iron straps. The hinges were iron, the handle was iron. Vines coiled around the threshold and reached for their ankles and drew when they touched the dark metal. Nell dragged the door open and they fell through. Inside smelled of candles and old stone. The bell rope hung white and thick from the dark square in the roof. Nell grabbed it with both hands and pulled. Nothing happened. She pulled again. Kieran and Paddy put their hands over hers and pulled with her. The rope moved. Above them, the bell turned on its beam and struck. Gong. The sound went through the bone. It went up the tower and out across the roofs and down the lanes, and for one breath all movement stopped. The vines that crept under the door recoiled, smoking where the iron straps licked them. Again, Nell said, and they pulled. Gong. Again. Gong. They pulled until they had no breath left and their palms burned. Outside, the vines fell back from the church wall and surged again along other paths away from the iron into doorways with soft wooden frames and latches that would not hold. Between tolls, the town was a throat trying to swallow and choking on its own food. Nell's arms shook, her breath rasped. She looked at the boys and saw what she did not want to see. Kieran's eyes had gone dull around the edges. Paddy's mouth was a small round hole that forgot to close. Stop, Kieran wheezed. It's not doing enough. Nell let the rope go. The bell swung on its own and gave one last tired gong. They stood and listened. Outside, the vines went on with their work. From the open door, a thin ribbon of bone dust blew in, caught the candle flame, and made it jump. Nell thought of the keeper's hand smoothing powder into the soil. She thought of the old words. On Halloween night, the harvest will eat the hand that feeds it. Your bones will grind, your seed will turn to rot. She swallowed. We can't save them, she said, the truth heavy in her mouth. Then what? Paddy said, small as a whisper. We live, Nell said. We run. Run where? Kieran asked. Anywhere the road doesn't smell of pumpkins. They looked at one another and knew that none of them wanted to see their homes now held. They went out the vestry door that opened to the back field. The iron latch burned the tip of a vine that probed there and made it whip away like a stung eel. They ran across the grass behind the church and down the hedgerow that led toward the river. Behind them, the village never found its voice again. At the edge of the field, they looked back. Moonlight lay on the windmill arms above the rise. They turned slow, creak, creak, creak. Down in the patch, the pumpkins glowed with a soft, warm light, as if a candle burned in each, though no one had cut them. The vines moved like they were breathing. They flowed toward the lanes, toward the beds, towards the chairs where weary people sat after a long day. A tall, pale figure walked the rows with an empty sack and a tired smile. The keeper didn't look up. He did not hurry. He had all the time in the world. Nell took the boy's hands and pulled them into the dark. In the morning, there were no voices in the square, no smoke from the chimneys, no dogs at the doors, only spills of yellow pulp on the thresholds and old pumpkins split down the side like mouths too tired to stay closed. The wind turned the mill, and the mill turned the bones, and the powder drifted and lay down again where it was told. People came in from the next parish and said the village had gone bad. They crossed themselves and did not stay. They spoke of a smell in the lanes that was not death and not life, and something in between. The story went back to the firesides. It turned to smoke again, and then to nothing. And once in a while, when a child would not keep to the road, the old voice would say, "Mind yourself at Halloween, mind the windmill and mind the pumpkins. The land remembers, the hand that feeds can be eaten." And far off, on nights when the moon was nearly full, someone would swear they saw a tall, pale man walking the edges of the field, smoothing white powder into the soil with the side of his hand, gentle as a mother laying down a baby. For now, the pumpkins are still, the vines have loosened, the windmill stands quiet under the dark sky. Let your breath slow like leaves falling one by one. Let your chest grow softer, your shoulders sink, and the weight of the night ease away. Another tale waits close, but for this moment, you're safe, listening and drifting, and carried deeper into the quiet. And now for the next tale, a tale called March of the Dead. My name's Joseph Cunningham, and this is what I saw on All Hallows Eve. I was walking the outskirts of the city where the last lamps thin out and the fields begin. Smoke from the bonfires lay low like fog. Children ran from house to house with masks and lanterns. Dogs barked and then went quiet. The air was cold enough to nip the inside of my nose. I had no plan to be out so late, but the road, it pulled at me. I kept going. At the far end of the graveyard wall, I heard the sound. Not a voice, not quite. It was a long breath that didn't end, a moan that started deep like wind in a pipe and climbed into something that made the hair on my neck stand. I stopped. No one else did. A cart rattled past me towards the square. A girl laughed behind her mask and showed me a handful of sweets. "Happy Halloween," she said, and ran on. I turned my head and looked through the iron bars of the gate. The ground moved. I thought it was a trick of the moon. And then I saw a hand. Earth fell from it in clumps. Another hand. Then a face, mud-smeared and white as chalk, pushing up through the grass. They weren't fast. They were slow and patient, like people after a long sleep. The first fella pulled himself out to the waist and rested there, mouth open. No breath clouded the air. He looked around with a child's shock, not joy or anger, just not knowing. He dragged one knee forward and then the other and came to his feet. He swayed. He held his hands out in front of him as if he were ready to catch something he couldn't see. The grave beside him moved next, a woman in a plain dress, then a small grave by the wall. I couldn't watch that one, so I looked away. More earth broke, more hands, the old stones leaned as the ground slumped like tired men. They didn't speak to one another. They did not look at one another. They only lifted their heads to the road and began to walk. I stepped back from the gate. The iron was cold against my coat. I should have run, but I didn't. I told myself I was the only man seeing this, that I had to make sense of it. Maybe that was true. Maybe I only wanted to know if the old stories were ever worth the fear we give them. They came through the gate without opening it. They passed between the bars like smoke through a crack. The iron flecked with frost when they brushed it. I pushed myself flat to the wall and they slid past me one by one, eyes wide, mouths half open, feet making no sound at all. I could see the ground under the heels as they stepped, no weight or print. So I followed. The road curved down past the meadows towards the bog. The wind carried the smell of peat and slow water. The moon was high and thin white cloud ringed it like glass. And somewhere on the hill a bell rang once and then went silent. I heard it inside my bones, not in my ears. When we reached the black pools, the water bubbled, not in heat, in movement. Mud lifted and fell in big breaths. Grey arms rose through the skin of the bog. A face opened its eyes, blinked mud away and stared up at the sky as if the moon were a new thing. They weren't bodies with flesh like ours. They were shapes the bog had kept and softened. They didn't break the water when they came free. They left no ripple. They put their hands on the bank and pulled, and the reeds bent for them without bending. They joined the line. On the far side of the fields, the old road cut to the crossroads. 4 ways, 4 hedges, 4 stones with names too worn to read. It was there, months back, that I'd met a stranger at midnight. I'd not thought of him all evening. The memory came now, clear as frost. I was walking home from a wake. The night was empty and big. At the middle of the crossroads, a man sat on the low milestone with his hat tipped down. He wore a dark coat with the shine gone off it, and boots with the old polish sunk deep into the cracks. His hair looked black, but when the moon hit it, there were threads of white through it like frost in a field. He had an animal smell about him, not foul, but clean and wild, like a horse after a run. A small flask rested in his palm, and the metal caught the moon. "Good night to you," I said, because it was always better to be polite to what you meet at a crossing. "And to yourself, Joseph," he said. Though I had not given him my name, he flicked the lid of a flask with a nail and held it out. "Drink with me." "What is it?" I asked. "Whiskey," he said. "The old kind from before your time." He smiled. It was not a man's smile. It had too many teeth in it, and they looked strong. He saw me staring and shut his lips soft. "Go on, drink with me, and you'll see what no man should see." It was a joke, I thought, a trick. I'd been called worse than fool for less than taking a sip at a crossroads, so I took the flask. The metal was warm. I lifted it and smelled apples and iron and smoke. So I drank. It burned in a way that wasn't heat. It burned like a road in my throat. I handed it back. He swallowed after me. "Good," he said in a voice like a low drum. "Good and done." He stood, and when he stood, he was taller than I'd thought. My coat fell straight as if there were nothing soft under. He tipped his hat and walked away into the hedge, not around it, through. The dark swallowed him and gave nothing back. I laughed to myself for being spooked by a trick of the eye, and I went on. After that, the memory blurs. The road ends, and I don't know why. Now, the march of the dead turned left at the same crossroads, and I turned with them. We passed the last cottages. In one, a woman was cutting bread by the light of a small lamp. Her child slept with his mouth open, a thumb gone loose near his cheek. The woman didn't look up when the dead went by the window. She did not shiver. She didn't cross herself. She wiped the knife on her apron and ate a heel of bread with butter. "Do you not see them?" I said, and struck the glass with my knuckles. She didn't turn her head. My hand left no mark on the pane. The line went on across the pasture, along the ditch, under trees that kept their leaves late. Owls watched us and did not call. A fox crossed the path and didn't notice there were legs it passed between. The world of warm blood and small breath went on about its business, and we were a river that ran through it, cold and unlit. The moans carried. Sometimes it was only one voice for a long time, low as a long bell. Sometimes many took it up together, a tide of sound that curled and fell and left the ground colder as it passed. They didn't look back to see who followed them. I could have touched their shoulders with my hands, but I didn't. I kept a yard between us and walked with them as if I were the last of the flock. We came to the river. The black water slid east, fat with last week's rain. The old bridge was there, stoned and arch and cold. The line of the dead went down to the bank and didn't stop. They walked into the water and didn't sink. The river moved through them like wind through a sheet hung on the line. And they came out the far side as if they hadn't crossed at all. I went up to the bridge because my feet were used to bridges. Halfway over, I looked down. The moon shone on the skin of the river. For a second, I thought I saw my face. This is how I knew something was wrong. There was no breath on the water, no fog from my mouth, no steam from my nose. I put my hand on the parapet. The stone felt like nothing, not cold or warm. The skin of my palm didn't understand it. On the far side, the road climbed towards the fields above the city where the long grass leans all one way when the wind is right. Along the hedges, more shapes came out of the darkness and joined. A man in a soldier's coat with mud on his buttons, a girl in a shawl with a lace of moss along her hairline, an old fellow with a fish hook stuck in his throat and a smile he couldn't close. I began to know faces. I'd poured a pint for that soldier last year. I'd bought a string of mackerel from that old fellow by the quay. I'd sworn at that girl for cutting across my path with her bike, and she had sworn back twice as hard, and none of them saw me. I tried to talk to them. "Tom," I said. "Nan, Christ above, is that you?" They didn't turn their heads. They only kept walking, not quick, not slow, a steady go like the pace of a man who has a job and does not like it but will not stop. We passed a field where a scarecrow leaned. The hat was half off and the turnip head was slit for eyes and mouth. The wind pushed it and it creaked and creaked and creaked and never fell. All right, I said to it, because talking to a carved head was no madder than talking to anything else that night. Joseph, a voice said at my ear, as if the scarecrow had answered, or the hedge, or the wind. I turned. The man from the crossroads walked beside me now, hat tipped low, step easy. You, I said, what did you put in that whiskey? The old kind, he said, and his teeth shone. Apples and iron and the last breath of a year. You liked it. You drank deep. What have you done? I said. Look at them. Look at all of them. I am looking, he said. I'm always looking. Why only me? I said. Why do I see this? He tipped his head, kind as a pony. Only you, he said. Are you sure? I looked up the hill, down the line. Every face was open and lost. Every eye was fixed on the road ahead. The terror was not of me and not of him. It was of not knowing. They didn't know where they were or what they were or where they were going. They only knew they must go. And the sound rose again, that long moan that began under the ribs and climbed into the teeth. It came out of my mouth with theirs. I stopped. The sound kept going. It came from me. It came from me. I pushed my fingers hard into my wrist where a pulse should be. Nothing. I put my hand on my chest, still. I opened my mouth and blew onto the back of my other hand to feel the warmth of my breath. There was no warmth. The skin of my palm stayed dry and cold. I turned to the hedge and pushed my hand into the tight sticks. It went through, easy as smoke. When I pulled back, there were no scratches on my skin. There was no mud. There was no nothing. What did you do? I said again. At the crossroads, what did you do to me? He smiled. He put the tip of a finger under the brim of his hat and lifted it so I could see his eyes. They weren't a man's eyes. They were deep black, and in them, if the moon had been brighter, I would have seen a field and a fence and a gate that opened the wrong way. He smelled of horse and apples and the iron taste of blood. His coat hung neat. His feet made no sound. His shadow went the other way to mine. I offered you a drink, he said, and a seeing. You said yes. It was a bargain. You drank. You saw. You're seeing now. I didn't know, I said. You never do, he said, fond as a farmer to a calf. It is the rule of the thing. What are you? I asked, though I knew. A puka, he said. He said it like a thing you would tell a mirror when you wanted it to see if you were real. He took off his hat and shook his hair, and it came away in a mane. And for a second his face was long and his teeth were longer. And then he put his hat back on and he was a man again. Go on, he said. Walk. It's what you came here for. I thought I was alive, I said. I thought I was the only living man watching the dead. He shrugged. Every man thinks he's alone and he's seeing. It is a small kindness the world gives you for a little while. How long does it last? I said. He looked up at the moon. Until it doesn't, he said. Until the year tips. until the bell strikes for a room you cannot hear. "Where do we go?" I said. He smiled again, tired now. "Ah, Joseph, if I told you that, it would be a different story." I took a step. The line took a step. It was easy now. My feet didn't complain. My knees didn't stiffen. My lungs didn't ask me to slow. The puka fell back and was gone without going. We went on. We crossed fields where the grass gleamed like milk. We passed a lane where a boy on a bicycle shot through our knees and never felt the brush of our coats. We passed a yard where a dog stood and stared at the gate and growled low, then hid under the step with his nose between his paws. In one cottage a man sat with a glass and a photograph in his hand and wept into it. His tears shone like small coins. When the moon went by, he lifted his head and looked at the door as if a draught had come under it. He didn't rise. The road rose, the moon lowered, or the clouds grew tired of holding still. Somewhere behind us a bell struck, once, twice, then no more. The sound didn't come through the air. It came through the bones I didn't have. It told me nothing except that it would not ring again. Again the line narrowed where two hedges met. We passed between them and came to a slope of land that fell away into nothing, not a cliff or a sea, a kind of night you could walk into. The first of us went over. There was no sound of falling and no splash. Only the line grew shorter. I turned my head for a last look at the city, lights in windows, smoke lying low. A child with a lantern on a doorstep, turning her mask in her hands, waiting for a friend. A cat washing its paw on a wall like this were any other night. I wanted to shout to them, to tell them it was me, that I was here. I didn't know their names anymore. The man from the crossroads stood a little way off, hat in his hands now, hair long over his ears, patient as a horse at a fence. He lifted the flask and the metal winked. "Drink with me," he said, soft, as if it were the first time again, "and you'll see what no man should see." "I have drunk," I said, "I have seen." He nodded. "Then go on, Joseph Cunningham." I stepped forward. The ground didn't meet my foot. The night took me up like water takes a stone when you drop it in where you found it. The last thing I heard was the moan of the line, and I was a part of it, and it was a part of me. And we went on into the place where the road does not need a name. I had thought I was chosen. I had thought I was cursed to see the dead. I am the only one of them walking aimlessly on All Hallows Eve, confused and curious and afraid, following the crowd because I didn't know what else to do. If there's a door at the end of this march, or a field, or a gate that opens the wrong way, I'll tell you, if I remember, if telling matters there. For now I go where the rest go, the veil is thin, the year has turned, the dead walk, and I walk with them. The march is over now, the veil has closed, and the fire here has gone quiet. If you've drifted with me through these Halloween tales, I'd be grateful if you left a like, and if you haven't yet, subscribe, so you'll always find your way back here. And if you're feeling extra generous tonight, there's even a way to leave a little super thanks, but only if it feels right for you. For now, rest easy, stay safe on this All Hallows Eve, and let yourself drift into sleep, with nothing waiting in the dark but quiet dreams. Sleep well and happy Halloween.